Everyone, welcome to our Creative Conversation segment on arts advocacy. We're really excited to have Jeff Robinson here. Most of you are probably familiar with him, but he is the executive director of the South Carolina Arts Alliance. It's a statewide nonprofit organization dedicated to advocacy, leadership development, and public awareness for the arts. In his role, Jeff leads efforts to strengthen public policy, public support, and public funding for the creative sector at both the state and national levels. The organization's flagship event, South Carolina Arts Day, which is typically in February, brings hundreds of arts leaders, legislators, students, educators, and advocates together at the State House each year to elevate the significant impact the arts have in the Palmetto State. Prior to joining the South Carolina Arts Alliance, Jeff spent 9 years in arts education as a middle school band director in York, and later as a teaching artist at the South Carolina Governor's School for the Arts and Humanities. A lifelong musician and arts advocate, Jeff holds a bachelor's degree in music education and a master's in arts administration from Winthrop University. He serves on various statewide boards and task forces and is the chair of Palmetto State Arts Education. He also serves as the National Treasury Secretary or Secretary Treasurer, sorry, for Phi Mu Alpha Symphonia, which is the nation's oldest and largest music fraternity. So, Jeff, welcome to Creative Conversations. If you could, just for a few minutes, share a little bit more about yourself, a little background on the South Carolina Arts Alliance, and some of the things that y'all are doing right now.
Sure. Thanks, Haley. And I'm excited to be here today. As you heard my bio, I'm the executive director of the South Carolina Arts Alliance, and we are a nonprofit organization that serves the entire state of South Carolina. The Alliance was founded in 1979, initially as a coalition of local arts council administrators. But since that time, over our almost 50-year history now, we've grown to include organizations and arts leaders, individual artists, arts educators, other folks who just believe in the importance of the arts in South Carolina. So that coalition has really broadened throughout our history. Our mission is threefold. Obviously, as an advocacy organization, advocacy has always been the core of our work, and that's primarily advocacy for public funding and public policy at the state and national level that support arts and arts education. We also know that an important way to strengthen the sector is to build up its leaders. We do that both through direct programming that we offer and we put on, like technical assistance trainings for arts organizations, but we also supplement existing leadership development opportunities with our particular area of expertise. So that might look like going before a group of community leaders who might not be directly involved in the arts, but then talking about the community impact that the arts have, to just kind of supplement some of that local or regional leadership development opportunities that are already happening. And then finally, raising public awareness for the power of the arts is a really important component to effective advocacy, because when you move the needle of public opinion, it helps broaden that coalition that I mentioned before, and helps have a broader coalition for effective change in the spaces where decisions are made. So public awareness is kind of that third bucket of the work that we do. But of course, these all supplement each other. They all work together toward the core of our mission, which is advocacy.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for giving that more robust view of it. I know a lot of learning around like the difference between advocacy and lobbying, and it's something that I've discussed a little bit with some constituents. So, in your own words, how would you describe arts advocacy and how is it different from lobbying?
Sure, yeah, and I think I can say all day we're an advocacy organization, but yeah, it's definitely helpful to start with some definitions. So, At a baseline level, advocacy is public support for a cause or an idea. So in our case, the cause of the idea would be the arts in general, the creative sector, or arts education, or public funding, or a specific policy position that impacts the creative sector. I think it's really helpful to think about advocacy as education on a topic, because it can happen in a lot of different directions. So yes, you can go educate elected officials about why an issue is important to their constituents, and you definitely should do that. But you can also, in the advocacy space, you're educating the public about the impact of a certain policy, or about the legislative process and how an issue area is being addressed, in the rooms where those decisions are happening. So the distinct difference between that and lobbying is kind of squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares, right? Lobbying is similar to advocacy, but different in some really distinct ways. And the most distinct way is that lobbying has to do with specific action to influence a specific action, right? So rather than broad education on a topic, it's taking action to get a specific outcome, right, on a policy or a position or from a person. So again, helpful to think about advocacy as education to build support for a general cause or an idea. Lobbying is more about that specific outcome. So I'll give you, it's all kind of nebulous. I'll give you some specific examples, right? So if I invite a legislator to a performance so they can see real time the impact of that funding in their community and really experience it for themselves, that's an example of advocacy, right? If we're sharing kind of that broader impact, or really how it's working for constituents, or even just what the impact of a specific policy would be, right? If we're advocating for a policy, that's all in the advocacy camp. If I am approaching a legislator or a decision maker, and asking them to vote a specific way, right, or introducing a piece of legislation, a specific piece of legislation, for example, rather than just education on the topic in general, then we cross over into the world of lobbying. It's a common misconception that nonprofit organizations cannot lobby, and that's not true. They have limits by the IRS in the amount of lobbying that they can do, and the amount of money they spend on lobbying. But there is an amount of lobbying that they can do, right? There is no limit on the amount of advocacy. So typically in our world, lobbying comes into play for really, really specific decisions and really, really specific moments, right? But then we can advocate throughout the year in that work that we do throughout the year. There's also different kinds of lobbying. There's what's called grassroots lobbying. So that's if I email, which we do a lot, right? If we were to email a bunch of our constituents and ask them to ask their legislator to take a specific action, right? That's grassroots lobbying, and that still kind of falls into that camp. If we're asking our members to email their legislator and just say, thank you for continuing to support the arts, this is why it's important to us, that's in the advocacy camp.
Great. Yeah. Thank you for giving that. I know on our end, when we give grants, we ask that people get in touch with their state representatives, state senators, just to say, like, hey, this is the support that we've given, like touching on the advocacy part,
Yes.
maintaining
Yep.
those relationships. And on the note of relationship building when it comes to advocacy, what are some ways, like outside of emailing, that people could get involved in advocacy? I guess specifically more so in smaller communities, like a more metropolitan area like Charleston or Greenville, all the way to a more rural area where it would be more like Lee County or parts of Kershaw, if you have any examples of that.
Yeah, so I think it's important to remember that that if you are involved in the arts, you're probably already engaging in advocacy, right? So if you're an organization providing arts in your community, you probably already have ways that you show your impact to broaden that support at the local level, right? Whether it's from donors or audiences or whatnot, right? Those are probably skills that folks already have, and that is advocacy, right? It's the same exact skills. If you're a participant, maybe you've already shared stories about the impact that an organization or experience is having on you or having on your community. When you engage with the Arts Alliance specifically, you've got an opportunity to bring those stories, right? Those things that are happening that are really personal. You have an opportunity to bring those to decision makers that are responsible for the funding and policy that impact that whole ecosystem. So, for example, you could attend our Arts Day in February, where we facilitate meetings with legislators for you. You could participate in Arts Advocacy Week, even from home, and integrate some of our public awareness campaigns into your own messaging, right? And tailor fit it for the local level. I definitely encourage folks that are already talking about the local impact of maybe a specific organization or a specific thing that they're involved in to look for ways that they can incorporate messages about public funding, right? And if they are recipients of an Arts Commission grant, about that direct impact. The things that happen, in those rooms that contribute to the work, and that also helps. When you bring that data to the table to kind of supplement what people understand personally because they're having that experience at the local level. You're really creating an impact that all communities can see, right? So this is why it's important to us. This is the broader impact that it has on our state. We want all communities to have the great things that we have here, right? And this is one of the ways that we do that, right? So it's most of the time not introducing something new, right? It might just be tapping into a new resource and thinking, how that can fit into the messaging of the work that you're already doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking on resources too, I know like we're all interested in having, you know, data based on the people that are coming to shows, coming to exhibitions, where they're located, seeing, tickets bought versus the number of people that have attended. All of those things play into advocacy in not only building audiences, but showing where the reach is and understanding like the ways that the arts impact community outside of just the arts, like the impact that it has on people that are traveling to a new place or, they're wanting to see a concert. And so beforehand, they go to a restaurant or a bar and get some food or a drink. They might stay overnight at a hotel. They might do another activity in tandem and spend like a whole weekend in a new area. And I am familiar with the data that we collect that kind of shows that different economic impact of the arts, maybe not just in communities and outside of that, but for lack of better terms, return on investment on the arts in South Carolina. Could you speak a little bit on that?
Yeah, no, I think you are already hitting it on the head. That a lot of times it's easy to kind of get caught up in the participants only, right? And what we want folks to understand, and I'm sure that anybody in this work already knows, is that the impact is so much broader than just the folks that actually directly participate in the arts, right? So there's this ripple effect that happens in communities that are arts rich, right? And the more arts rich they are, the more they benefit from those things. And you gave really good examples of if you're going to a show downtown, you're probably spending money at a restaurant. You're probably spending money on parking. You got kids, you might be paying for a babysitter, right? If you're coming from out of town, you might be paying for a hotel. So I think those are really obvious to demonstrate, and of course we've got the data to back that up, both at the kind of the large economic cluster level, but also at like the impact of community, like nonprofit organizations specifically, right? Nonprofit organizations that are spending money in their community, that their audiences are spending money in their community, and then that ripples out, right? It creates more demand, it creates more jobs in places outside of the arts, right? Because now they have a higher demand for their goods and services because of the organizations that exist and then the audiences that come in and participate with those. I think that also there's those somewhat less tangible, but anybody that's experienced it or lived in the community understands, right? That there is a higher level of community, right? Community being I guess an adjective in this case, right? That communities that are creative, that are arts rich, folks come together more, right? They're more likely to see and experience different perspectives, right? Which then makes them work toward common goals in their community a little bit better. So the arts definitely convene people, right? They keep them in public spaces. They get them out and participating in their community more. We know that folks that participate in the arts regularly are also more likely to do other community engagement things, right? Belong to other social clubs, right? Or spend more time with their family. So there's this ripple effect that, like, yes, it is beneficial to the participants, but that's not really where the bread and butter comes when we talk about that broader return on investment and that community impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And based on resources, I was looking at the arts at no, not the arts admin, the Arts Alliance's website before talking with you and coming up with some of these questions. And I want to highlight for those that are joining us that the Arts Alliance has a lot of really great tools, advocacy resources, ways to understand what's going on in our state, what's going on federally, touching on both funds from the National Endowment of the Arts, funds related to arts education. Back in 2020, I know the shuttered venue crisis was a big thing that the Arts Commission was dealing with, as well as the Arts Alliance. I know that you weren't with the Arts Alliance at that time, but what are some of the benefits of using the resources that y'all provide on your website to help strengthen either arts advocacy tools in a specific organization or to encourage like different talking points when discussing advocacy with either the people that they're serving or the legislators in the state and possibly federal level?
Yeah, so we always say that that an effective advocacy message is a story combined with data, right? So you kind of bring to the data to the table to support what you're really the expert in, which is the story, right? And I think that exploring those resources, you can find the data that's going to most well support what you're trying to communicate. But I can't stress enough that personal impact story, or community impact story, or whatever it is that you bring, is actually the thing that makes each individual advocate unique, right? And it is also the thing that resonates with decision makers the most, right? And it's the things that they'll say right back to you, right? They'll share their story, right? And then that data just allows you to come kind of from a place of expertise. So yeah, really encourage folks to kind of explore those and figure out what makes the most sense to elevate, or find different ways to elevate all of them if that makes the most sense. And this, I mean, this has been effective, right? So there's that broader, like, how do we just keep the conversation going about the impact of the arts? But then obviously, there are times when there are really specific things that are happening. You mentioned the shuttered venue crisis, right? It's like, this is something that we need folks to engage with us to help address. Our advocates have helped secure steady increases to statewide arts funding for about the last decade. We're pretty proud that in South Carolina, grant funding for the arts currently lives around $1.50 per capita, which is really competitive, or exceeds in a lot of cases other states like ours. But it's still a pretty modest investment that has a huge return for, again, all South Carolina citizens, not just the folks that participate in the arts. And I obviously can't stress that enough. Sometimes the work is about sustaining rather than growing. Prior to my time, the Arts Alliance had a hand in mobilizing grassroots advocates when former governors, have vetoed all or a portion of that state funding for the arts, right? So sometimes those are moments of emergency, right? Where if that public opinion and that messaging is kind of built up in the good times, right, then it makes those moments a little bit easier. Yeah, I could list some other things. I mean, we've secured additional funding for arts education through the Education Improvement Act, which was a big policy piece affecting education in South Carolina a number of years ago. We made sure that the arts were represented in the profile of the South Carolina graduate. We've promoted arts friendly language in a number of different statewide policies that maybe aren't specifically arts focused, or initiatives that aren't specifically arts focused, like the Read to Succeed Act is something that folks may recognize. We helped advocate for legislation that established South Carolina cultural districts, an increase in gifted and talented funds for the arts. And then, in general, we're monitoring what's going on, and we're keeping constituents involved, right? So there's that, empowering them throughout the year to just really think about how they talk about the arts, right? How they make the case, maybe in their communities, or in those moments when they're speaking to legislators, or even just to their audiences, right? How do we train our audiences to not just have that personal story, but maybe to have that data piece in the back of their mind? And then again, always going back to that ripple effect, that it's not just about the folks that are directly participating, right? This is a benefit, makes the entire state stronger, right? It benefits all citizens.
Yeah, absolutely. And that I think that's a important piece that a lot of people play on is that, it's not just confined to the arts. It is the larger community. And part of that is, education, like having opportunities for kids in schools to be involved in the arts, having the tie-in specifically to making sure the profile of the South Carolina graduate includes those arts education standards and your background as an educator too, working with middle school bands and as a teaching artist, that plays into that progression of growing the arts from the younger communities, making sure it can be sustained and that we're providing opportunities for them in the future when either they're working in organizations or they become educators themselves, or if they're working as an independent artist and are trying to do, different tasks around town, traveling, get their name out there, and touching a little bit more on that education portion. As an educator in the past, how do you feel your experience, specifically in arts education, has helped you work in this position and convey the information that we have about the arts in South Carolina to the people that you connect with?
Yeah, so yeah, that's my background, right? So obviously, I bring a specific passion for that portion of the work, to the table. That's always going to be my bread and butter. It's really nice. And you talked about how advocacy works both ways, right? So it's always nice to like be in front of a group of educators, or a group of education leaders, and say, like, I am not an outsider, right? I've been in your shoes, right? And I'm very passionate about the work that you do. So that, I mean, that helps from a communication standpoint. And then obviously, just saying those things to the people that need to hear them is a lot easier, because it comes from a really personal place, right? And if when I bring personal stories to the table, those are the personal stories that I'm going to fall back on. And the growth that I've seen in students, or the profound impact that I've seen it have on students. And obviously, I continue to see that impact now that I'm outside of the classroom, right? And I'm on the outside looking in. I mean, that doesn't stop. We again, it's sometimes the default fallback is we do arts education so we can strengthen the artistic sector, and it's so much more than that, because again, we're talking about the benefit that it has for all of South Carolina. Now, I will say that there is there is a little bit of a self-interest there, right, for maybe organizations that are on the more professional end of things, right? That, like, there is data that shows that that the more students are involved in the arts when they are young, the more likely they are to be patrons of the arts when they're adults, right? So that's important too, right? But at the end of the day, yes, we want musicians. Yes, we want We want folks in the theater, but we also just want productive citizens, right? We want students that are going to be successful in whatever they do. And that really is the key impact of arts education, right? That you are building students with soft skills that employers are saying are missing, right? And so we want to put more folks into the workforce that have those soft skills. We want creative individuals, because creative individuals innovate, and it doesn't matter if they are running a nonprofit arts organization or they're working for Boeing, right? If you want the folks that are really going to be that are going to bring change, right? Positive change, innovation. Then yes, they need to have the skills like math and science, right? That actually create the thing, but without the creativity to supplement it, you don't really get innovation, right? You just kind of get doing the same thing over and over and over again. So I think that those are really important to acknowledge as well. That it really is it's an equity issue, in that we want the best for students, right? And we know what arts education does for students, whether they are in a band program or they're getting arts integration in their math class, right? It's helping them learn better. It's helping them be more creative individuals. It's giving them voice and choice and building confidence and all these things that we all want to see, right? Not just arts advocates, but we all want to see for our students. So that is the key reason why it should be important to everyone, right? And those are the things that I often lean back on when I talk to legislators, for example, is, hey, I know that these are goals that we all have, and I think that we can fulfill these better, right? And just like anything else, if this community or this school district, the students are really benefiting from investments in arts education, but then this community, the students are not benefiting as much because the investment is not as high, right? Then we're not getting the same educational product in both places, right? So that's when it starts to be, if we know what this does for students, then we need to make sure that every student has access to this. Again, whether it's being in an arts classroom or using arts across the curriculum, or using arts enhancement strategies, or having a teaching artist come in and work, in an assembly, whatever it is, right? That benefits the students no matter where they're headed.
Yeah, absolutely. And education doesn't stop like once they're out of the classroom. 12th grade comes, some people move on to college, some people do the military, some people work. But even as adults and adults specifically that work in arts organizations, we're always trying to improve ourselves, learn new items, be up to date with all of the different changes that are going on, whether that is introducing AI to an organization, whether that is staying up to date on state, federal budget things, or even paying attention to your own budget and your own leadership skills. So, talking a little bit about the leadership development component of the Arts Alliance, what are some opportunities that y'all share? I'm familiar with the opportunities, but for those who may be joining us and might be unfamiliar that this arm of arts advocacy exists, what are some ways that they can be involved?
Yeah, so we our programming most of the time tends to focus on really specific like technical assistance, right? So like here, let's do a deep dive into a skill that a leader might need for a specific thing, right? So for the past couple of years, financial management has kind of been our topic. We're shifting gears next fiscal year to working with boards, right? Just kind of we've identified some things that are going to make all organizations stronger, right? And then providing those free opportunities for organizations to come spend the day with us, but also spend the day with a professional, facilitator that we bring in, right? Because we're not experts in all of these areas, right? And then walk away with tools that they can then take back to their organization and really institute change at an organizational level. We've also had the opportunity to host the South Carolina Arts Leadership Institute, which is a retreat. We partnered with the Arts Commission on. It's a retreat for specifically for executive level leaders, right? So that one's a little bit different, and that is focused on the challenges or the skills that are really specific to board presidents or executive directors or artistic directors, right? Folks that are at the top of the staffing structure in an organization, and that really kind of focus on fostering the leader, right, and less of like the arts organization skills, although those have presented themselves and are kind of built into that in different ways. But there's something about executive leadership, right, and whether it's taking care of yourself, right, um, or working with certain communities that I think are really unique to that, right, and they face specific challenges. So that was important for us to kind of bring together the folks that are facing those challenges, give them a place to kind of bounce ideas off of each other, learn from the facilitators we bring in, but also learn from each other in the room, right, in a really protected space that they know is just people that are doing what they're doing. So again, trying to be really, really intentional. We've offered some virtual things, right, which are a little bit more low touch, kind of come in for an hour, get a couple new ideas or skills, and walk away with. Those are always really easy to tune into. Whenever possible, we try to offer things for free so they are as accessible as possible. And then, like I said at the beginning, sometimes it's supplemental, right? So maybe Arts and Basic Curriculum Institute is convening a bunch of leaders, right? So we can come in and talk about advocacy skills a little bit, right? Or maybe a Chamber of Commerce is bringing together local leaders so we can come and talk about community impact of the arts. So those tend to be a little more tailor fit, right? And again, in our area of expertise, but just kind of manifests itself at different levels, and when possible, tries to be responsive to like what organizations need. And every time we do one of these trainings, we ask, what do you want to learn more about, right? It doesn't have to be about this topic, and then we kind of use that to think over 3 to 5 years. How can we circle back and offer this in a really meaningful way?
Yeah, and having that space to, you mentioned this, but having that space for people to talk with each other, bounce those ideas off of each other. Sometimes it can be easy to be like, okay, this is going on in my organization. This is something that we are facing, but it can be hard to kind of grasp the concept and the weight that other organizations are facing similar challenges and going through those in the same way. Great way to bounce ideas off of each other and a great way to get more resources and information. Have them for your organization and share them with others too.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I
Oh, yeah,
think I
yeah.
think I think that's important because there are lots of places that nonprofit leaders specifically can go to strengthen their skills, right? So we're not under the auspices that we can provide everything, right? Or that even that we're providing anything that is necessarily unique, right? Because there's a lot of overlap. Financial management, like building budgets, scenario planning, um, uh, the operations behind your finances, right? Those are not unique to arts organizations, but there are unique challenges that arts organizations face, right? So the one thing that we do think that we can bring to the table is just make sure that we're creating these spaces where, yes, you could go learn this skill and kind of a more broader training that is maybe made up of a lot of different nonprofit leaders, but for this training, the folks in the room are going to be are going to be similar to the challenges that you're facing, and the facilitator understands who's in the room, right, and understands. And in the case of our financial management training, the facilitator had a background working with arts organizations, right, so we were able to tailor fit that a little bit more.
Yeah, having the best possible fit for those trainings too, I think makes all the difference too, because there are, science organizations that are dealing with different things, religious organizations, community centered, like food banks, shelters, all those good stuff. They're dealing with those similar things, but specific to the arts, there's that difference in community that it serves and that it can be more of a broader reach. So it's really, I appreciate that y'all bring in people that do have that arts background or experience in working with arts organizations to make sure the information that they're getting actually pertains to what they're doing and what they're experiencing. Yeah. And that, so shifting into a little bit of a different section, we talked a little bit about the South Carolina Arts Day at the beginning of this, and as well as Arts Advocacy Week. And that's another really great way that organizations and individual artists, artists of any kind, even arts appreciators that just like to be in the audience and really love that atmosphere, a way that they can get together, connect, and speak to legislators on the state level. And that's something that the Arts Alliance oversees every year. If you could talk a little bit about what all happened this past year at Arts Day, or typical traditions that people can participate in if that is something they choose to do.
Yeah, so it's kind of a two-parter, and some folks come for just one of the days, some folks come for both days. But we actually start what we call Arts Day with a summit portion, where we just again spend a day with just the advocates in the room, right? We bring in guest speakers, right? We've got networking opportunities built in, and it really is supposed to be about inspiration, right? So we can kind of put someone in front of them that is a kind of a living example of that impact, right? And they could hear that story, right? And maybe that resonates with them, and it kind of gets the creative juices flowing about how they might share their own personal story. Maybe we bring in somebody that's got some really compelling data, right, that can help build an advocacy message. We've been trying to curate that to kind of balance that inspiration, that learning, that networking, that being in community together, and that's really kind of all happens on that first day. And then that's a relatively new thing for us. So this is the second year that we have done that portion of Arts Day. What our organization has done for many years, far prior to when I joined the organization, is we've had a State House Day, right? And that's when we, gather advocates in the morning, do a little bit of a debriefing, and then facilitate legislative meetings throughout the day. They work with county captains. So there's somebody that's designated from their county that has already been in contact with legislators, kind of organized a schedule for the day, right? So all you have to do is show up, right? And then there's somebody that's going to kind of be your guide throughout the day, help drive those meetings, let you know where you need to be, and when you need to be there. And that's somebody that in most cases is with an organization that has a countywide focus, right? So, even if you're not in a meeting that's with your legislator, you might have audiences that are constituents of that legislator, because we're all, within the same county. I'll also acknowledge that we just have folks that the legislative meeting is not necessarily their thing, but they still just like to be there to be part of a show of support, or again, just kind of be a fly in the wall and learn from others and just listen. And I think that's totally fine too. And I don't want folks to be turned away because they're like, man, I don't want to go in an office and and talk to people. Like, I just feel like I'm not ready for that yet. We'll definitely encourage you to come and just listen, right? And then, maybe you grow and eventually you get to that point where now you do want to engage in the conversation. But being there, I think, has a lot of meaning too. We are usually recognized up in the galleries of the chambers, right? That, hey, the legislators say, hey, the advocates are here, right? We're celebrating South Carolina Arts Day. So it's really a show of force. So it's an opportunity to maybe just to learn, if you've never been to our state capitol, right? It's a great opportunity to do that and just to learn a little bit how things work around there. We end the day with performances on the State House steps. So that again is just like, hey, we're here. The arts are important in South Carolina, and once a year we just get to remind the folks that are in that building, but also the folks that are in the community at our capital, right? That this is something that's important to South Carolinians. So we make sure that we are there and we're present once a year.
Yeah, and the conversation is something that I did when I was in undergrad and grad school. It was always fun to see all the different kinds of art and talk to those legislators. I was, the first year that I went, I was one of the ones that kind of like stood in the back of the room and listened to what the people were talking about. And a lot of people had different information about their organizations or the art that they're working on, and the direct impact that they saw. And there were a lot of people in the state legislature that we're very excited to hear about all the different things that are going on and how communities have support and the way that the state has been able to support the arts in South Carolina. So I think those who are a little nervous to try that out, it's definitely okay, like Jeff said, to sit and observe, see what's going on, and then get a little bit more involved as the years go on, especially if the arts has a near and dear place to your heart, which I would assume it would if you're listening to this. Also, I forgot to say this at the beginning. We do have a Q&A area down at the bottom of this chat. If you have any questions for Jeff about arts advocacy or the Arts Alliance, feel free to drop them in there and we'll answer them. But while we wait on some questions to come in, I wanted to note that the Arts Alliance has a membership program. Would you be willing to talk a little bit about that and what it looks like?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, our membership program is what supports our advocacy work, and really is structured to the main purpose of our organization is to make sure that the folks that are doing the work on the ground, right, have representation in this space, right, and that is what our membership program is structured for, right, to really support that work and ensure that it can continue, that advocacy work can continue. There are a couple perks that come with that, right? So we do, you can sign up for a free newsletter, and we'll just kind of give you a basic once a month check in on what's going on, or we'll send out alerts if there's anything that we need to take action on. But our members get an additional newsletter each month that's a real legislative deep dive, right? So we might dive really deep into an issue that maybe is not in that free newsletter, but just something we think that folks might want to learn more about, something that we're watching but maybe we're not ready to take action on yet. So that's a perk that comes with that. Our members also get early access to our events, right? So for free events that fill up fast, you're the first ones to hear about it, so you can register before they fill up. For events that have a cost associated with them, there's a discount for members that's exclusive just to that membership. So for folks that are leading organizations, please visit our website, scrtsalliance.com/join. You can see more about that, and it's a tiered membership system that's based on budget size, but always encourage organizations to just choose the amount that makes the most sense for them, even if it doesn't align with where they fall on that tier. Because some organizations might be in a place where they just want to try it out, right, get their feet wet, and then when they see kind of that value, then maybe that their membership increases each year, or maybe not. But either way, we get them plugged in. Our work is so coalition based, right? We're a statewide organization. So we really rely on the folks on the ground to help us get dialed into what the needs are. So that way we can communicate those needs in the proper places, right? So that's why our members are so important in helping us really have that coalition-based model.
Yeah, absolutely. Being in touch with y'all, especially when I was working in an organization, helped a lot of, streamlining how we could get in touch with legislators, but then also communicating to our audiences how advocacy impacts our work and the importance of advocacy, not just on a state level, but on that community level as well. Again, they have really great resources, really great events. There was just a financial management course last week in Somerville. As Jeff mentioned, it was the last one of that series. So if you're interested in different things like that, next year, again, they'll be focusing a little bit more on board development, board planning, and the Arts Leadership Institute, which is held every year in conjunction with the Arts Commission. Those are all really great opportunities and ways that you can get in contact and interact with the Arts Alliance outside of Arts Day and outside of just that newsletter.
Haley, I should
Um,
I should also note, even though it's not the same as being there live and doing a session, all of our technical assistance trainings, so all of our financial management trainings. Past, we've done some fundraising stuff, some community development stuff. All of those materials are available for free on our website. If you navigate to the programs tab and then leadership development, all the way at the bottom of that page, they just live there after we finish the session. So again, it's not the same thing as being there in person, but some of those have workbooks that come with them that you can just kind of work through self-paced. So if you're just looking for resources in the leadership development space, you can find those there. That's a good place to start.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I will send out an email at the end of this to everyone that has come with the website information, information on how to contact you, and a little bit more guidance on finding some of those programs because that really is a benefit to a lot of organizations. Let's see if we have any. No questions in the chat right now, but if you have any, please drop them in. We're happy to answer them. We did have one question when people were registering for this, talking about arts guilds, and what is the best way for a guild to get involved in arts advocacy. Would you recommend something different because of their structure or something along the lines of what we've talked about today?
Yeah, so I think a guild is a good example of how we can broaden coalitions, right? And this is not necessarily unique to guilds, although guilds are also made up of members, right? So I like to think about, whether it's members or it's audiences, we might be reaching primarily the creative space, right? But then each organization has its own sphere of influence, right? And our goal is to get the message to as much of the public as possible, right? And then, maybe each of those members in a guild has their own sphere of influence, right? So a lot of the things I think hold true the same way that it would for an organization that, like, yes, we want guilds represented at Arts Day because they're representing artists, right? And that's, and that is the a part of the work that we're doing. So I'd love to have some of their members there, right? Or maybe partner with a guild and figure out the best way to get those artists there. Because I know sometimes getting artists to step away from their work or take time off of if they have a day job right outside of making art, and show up even for that day. Sometimes that's a heavier lift than maybe a leader of an organization that, like, that's just their work location for the day. So I'm always happy to talk to guilds about maybe what their unique needs are, and how we can help them meet that. But then also, I mean, they represent a really specific voice in the sector, right? And the needs of artists are not necessarily the same as the needs of organizations, right? I think there's a lot of different ways that we can partner, whether it's finding ways to bring the guilds to the things that we're already doing, or I'm always happy to go to where guilds are, right, and speak to their members, and kind of bring that message directly to the community. We do a lot of that work, and sometimes we have to go where the work is happening, and we're always happy to do that. So, if you want to partner on something, please reach out, and be happy to chat more.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And since I haven't seen any other questions pop up, just to wrap up today, is there anything that you haven't had the opportunity to share that you'd like to squeeze in these last few minutes? Also, what is your favorite part about the work that you're doing?
Well, so I'll answer that question first. My favorite part of the work that I'm doing is just the community, right? I mean, I get to be around my people all the time, and that's a pretty, but my people are all over the state, so that's sometimes a heavy lift, but it's really cool. So whether I'm just being in community with other leaders or I'm actually actively experiencing the arts, I get to do that full time, and I definitely don't take that for granted. And also, as I said, it's really important. I mean, I can't just sit here in my home office right now. Right? I just can't sit here and speak for an entire state. from here all the time, right? I need to kind of be there and experience and then take those experiences back for maybe folks that aren't able to be in the other spaces that I'm in. So love bringing people together, love creating opportunities for community, love seeing the real-time impact that it has on them and their organizations. I'm really grateful that we get to do that. Um, what was the other thing? Anything that I wanted to wrap up with? Gotcha.
Yeah.
I think that sometimes if you go to our website and you look through all the resources, like it can be really overwhelming at first, and it's like, man, I just don't have the bandwidth to do this. So what I always want to encourage folks to do is again start to think about the work that you are already doing and how you might incorporate things in really small ways into that. So a good example of this would be you are already probably doing a curtain speech. If you're a performing arts organization, you're probably already doing a curtain speech, right? What a perfect time to get in front of your audiences and saying, hey, silence your cell phones, and bathrooms are over there. In case of fire, there's the exit. And also, we're really grateful for the public funding in South Carolina that makes this performance possible. And this is the return on investment. This is the impact that it has on students. Really just deliver those messages, because again, it's about a sphere of influence. Maybe there are tons of folks in that room that have never heard that before. They hear it for the first time, they take it with them, and then they repeat it, right? I think that that's really powerful. Maybe it's something more direct, like have a postcard writing campaign set up in your lobby, so when folks leave, right, they've just experienced the arts. Wow, that's wonderful, I want to tell my legislator about it and say thank you, right? Social media is a great way. You're already in contact with your audiences, right? So maybe we can drop some messages into that planned social media. We've got a calendar on our website that actually breaks down at the national level and at the state level the legislative calendar, right? So you can see when your constituents are going to be at home in their community, or not your constituents, your leaders are going to be at home in their community. So maybe you can kind of plan your year as you're sitting down to plan your calendar and say, hey, we know that U.S. House members are going to be home for this entire month. We know we've got an event going on that month. Let's go ahead and extend that invitation, right? So really just kind of thinking about the work you're already doing and how you might supplement a little bit, instead of thinking about, well, here's what we're already doing, and then here's something separate that we have to kind of engage in. All of those things are meaningful, and I never want to downplay how important those baby steps are in creating this broader support, right, and continuing to build these coalitions for the moments when it becomes the most important, right? It's actually those little moments that tee us up for that, and not everybody come to the table for the first time when it's an emergency or whatever the case is.
Yeah, absolutely. Creating that community, using those resources, making sure that's all available to people is super important. And I appreciate the work that you do as just an arts appreciator and as a musician. And I would just like to thank you for talking today. This has been really great and super helpful. For the people that have attended, thanks for being here. You're going to receive an email that has Jeff's information, the website to the Arts Alliance, so that you can access these resources, see the calendar, get in touch in those various ways, as well as a survey that kind of goes through part by part. Did you enjoy this conversation? Was this conversation something that would be helpful for you and your organization? And also some recommendations on the upcoming creative conversations for fiscal year 2027. We have one more creative conversation left this fiscal year. It will be on Tuesday, May 19th, again from 12 to 1, and that is going to be on arts and health, and it will feature MUSC's Arts and Healing program. So if you're interested in working with communities that are going through illnesses or working in healing, working in mental health, this would be a really great opportunity for you to join us. Again, it's free. I'll send that information as well. Um, but yeah, Jeff, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation. Everybody tune in to the Arts and Health, because you're going to learn a lot, and then that's even more that you can add to your advocacy message, because we didn't even touch on that today. What
Sure.
amazing work they're doing at MUSC. But thanks so much for the invitation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. I hope you have a good day.